get started with this show on the road. So first of all, hi everybody. If you don't know me, my name's Maria Marquis here at Coda. I am the Chief Cheerleading Officer. I love celebrating our makers, celebrating the active making, and just having a good time with all sorts of folks in the Codaverse. Now, luckily for all of you, I'm joined by two fabulous folks who are going to help me as we have this conversation about Coda 3.0. I'm going to start with Shishir. Shishir, I know you're new to Coda. This is your first week, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the group in case folks don't know who you are.
Thank you, the wonderful Maria Marquis. I'm Shishir Mehrotra. I'm one of the founders here at Coda. Actually know a bunch of you already, but really excited to get a chance to speak with you today.
Yes, excellent. And I'm also joined by Eric. Eric, would you introduce yourself to the group so folks know a little bit about you and who you are?
Yes, hello. Hi, I'm Eric Kalita. I'm a developer advocate at Coda. So it's my job to help people that are trying to learn our more technical codey, developer parts of Coda, how to get started, how to be successful, and how to build on Coda, if we could stand there.
It's like, where is my desktop background? Yes. And I would love to know, folks, go ahead, post a chat for me. Give me a yes or no. How many of you have tried the Pack Studio, maybe explored, maybe even built a pack? Anybody do that? Just give me a yes or no. Hey, I love it. We're seeing some love for Eric in chat. Nice. I agree. Eric is awesome. I love this, Nat. Not yet, but maybe. Yeah, it's just helpful for us to know kind of where folks are at with that. Not yet. I love the intensity here of like, I'm going to do it. Connor has. Beautiful. Also, welcome to everybody just joining us now. Remember, at any point in time today, if you have a question, you can just let us know. So let's start off with Coda 3.0. Shishir, I'd love for you to just share maybe a little bit of a story of kind of how we got here and how you think about Coda 3.0 in that larger, the larger story of Coda. I'd just love to hear from you about that.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I think it's been quite a journey for 3.0. As background, we did our 1.0 release back in 2019, so it's about 3 years after our first open to the world release, and that was really about sort of just introducing Coda, docs as powerful as apps. About a year after that, we did 2.0, and 2.0 was really, our theme was a new doc for teams, and so we focused a lot on the things that we saw as Coda got adopted by teams and companies, everything from workspaces and locking permission to everybody's favorite at the time was crosstalk. And about 2 years ago, we decided to make a few longer term investments, and that's what became 3.0. To be honest, I thought some of them would happen faster, but they turned out to be harder than you might expect. And hopefully you'll appreciate some of the thought and detail that went into each of those pieces. But as we thought about how to describe 3.0, we came up with the term, the doc that brings it all together. And what we mean by that is a few different things. And you'll see in the blog post there were 4 big updates, but the big ones are a brand new editor that brings together what we think of as publishing and authoring, structured and unstructured data all in one place. That was definitely the hardest part of the work, rebuilding the core of Coda. The second is changing our view of how the community can contribute to the product. For most of you, that will look like opening up packs, so anybody can build packs, and we'll show you some good examples of that. But the sort of core philosophy there is to allow anybody to help contribute to driving Coda forward. The third one is a different approach to the marketplace, and I think we'll talk more about this as well. But before starting Coda, I used to run the YouTube products. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of there is the relationship we built with the community. In particular, YouTube is still the only major media platform I know of that directly pays creators. And we wanted to make sure there was clear incentive for how people could build their businesses on Coda, not just use it as a tool for their teams. And then finally, there's a long list of other updates. But our philosophy on it was to let them out as they became ready. So you've probably seen a lot of them coming out as we went. But I'm happy to highlight a few that you might have missed as we sort of pulled it all together. So that's the basic idea, Coda 3.0, the doc that brings it all together.
Amazing. And I was very excited. I got to do the voiceover for our little promo videos, which was very fun. We have a really good question here from Connor, and I'd actually love to hear the answer from both you, Eric, from that pack side, and from you, Shishir. What were some of the things that were maybe surprisingly hard? So Eric, let's start with you from the Pack Studio side. Anything that was like, oh, wow, this problem is a bigger problem set than we originally thought?
Yeah, I mean, I came into Coda kind of just as they were cresting some of those problems, so I got to hear of them, but not face up them against myself. I think one of the ones that I thought was so impactful, though, was to really this decision to make sure that building a pack was accessible to people that were not full-time engineers. So we're offering two different interfaces for building a pack. One that's very professional, command line tools, like the Matrix, exactly. And that's going to fit for people who are developers, our partners that we have with some big companies. They know software. You can write software that works with Coda. But I think we created this other interface called the Pack Studio, which is much more user-friendly. It's in a browser. It has autocomplete. Examples are built right in. I think the pivot to kind of make sure that when we launch this interface, it's not just for the few who code day in and day out, but it's for everyone who wants to kind of up level what they're doing in Coda and kind of go beyond the default set of building blocks. I think that was a challenge for the team, both in building out a whole lot of new interfaces, but also a cultural shift in how we think about who is coming to build a pack on our platform.
Yeah. And for me, like if I think about Coda 3.0, so much of what is underpinning it is that idea of the power of anyone to be able to learn and grow and be like, yeah, I've got a problem I want to solve. I can do that here. And this is something that we're doing not just again for one fancy person, but like, hey, anybody can make money on the platform. Hey, anybody can start building a pack. And one thing that Eric and I are starting to think about is what does like PAX education look like? So I'm really excited to partner there. Shishir, I'd love to hear from you. What were some of the things that were particularly surprisingly challenging with other elements of the Coda 3.0 launch, like those undiscovered problem sets, which I always love?
Yeah, and I think we can come back to some of the other ones on PAX too. I think the one Eric mentioned is definitely the deepest was the developer target, and being able to be in that online environment. I think there's a lot of subtleties in how making a product like Coda extensible like that, and making sure it doesn't break the product for others. So I think we can talk more about that as well. Maybe I'll spend a moment on the editor, and I think I'll answer your question, Connor, with a little bit of showing. And here I'll pull up my screen. So so there are two big things. So we rebuilt the editor of Coda, and the editor, when you picture editor, think blinking cursor, blank screen. This is what we refer to as the editor. There we go. As the editor in Coda, as you can come and type anywhere. And we rebuilt this from scratch, and most of you probably didn't notice early on because we did it, I think, maintaining all the different past things pretty well. What do you call that? Backwards compatible way. But there's a bunch of new things there, and I can show you a little bit of what was hard in doing that. So the first thing people are going to notice is what we call page layouts, and it's a pretty simple idea. Is that you can take these little handles, and I'm sure many of you have seen this on pop up on the blocks in Coda, but you can take these and not only drag things up and down, but you can now drag things side by side as well. You can form things that lay out side by side. Now, that might seem really simple. Turns out to be incredibly complicated to get that right. And the way I think about it is, if you were to divide editors into two big buckets, there's editors that I think are usually very focused on what we refer to as authoring. So it's blinking cursor, usually a flow-based layout as you type things just naturally work their way down a page. And the second class of editors that are usually focused on websites or wikis, and they tend to be focused on precise layout. And so we wanted a way to make these two things fit together without losing the original parts of the editor. So a few things that you may notice that sort of highlight that challenge. So one that's particularly challenging is just selection. It just turns out to be really hard to do things like this and just select across things. It's the thing you all come to expect out of any flow-based editor you've used, whether that's Apple Notes or Notepad or Word or Google Docs. You're just used to being able to do things like that. Another test we use a lot is the cursor test. So you just hit up on the cursor and work your way up the page, you should get back to the same, up and then back down, you should get back to the same spot. Probably one of the toughest is collaboration. So many products that have a sort of website or wiki metaphor, when you're editing inside of a block, you're actually locking the block for anybody else, or worse, you're actually co-editing, and when you finish, whoever finishes first is going to write over the whole thing, which is a thing that you don't notice until you've been using it for a while. But getting each of these things right was pretty difficult. So that's on the the sort of first main thing in the editor and what we call the erasing the line between publishing and authoring. The second one was a deeper technical choice, was canvas columns. And, to give a sense of this, we heard lots of, for side-by-side and page layouts, generally people would say it directly as I just want to be able to lay things out side by side, whether that's text or charts or images or so on. This need was very clear. The canvas columns need was more subtle. People would bring it to us in many different ways. I mean, what we would hear it as, hey, I'd really like to simplify my left-hand pane. Pages in Coda are a very popular feature. People just wanted it to be, we saw lots of docs with hundreds of pages over there. Can I simplify that down? Sometimes people would ask for things like, I want to be able to use a table, but still be able to use all the things that I'm used to from pages. I want to be able to use slash commands or put in a voting table, or be able to put a table inside a table as part of my notes or so on for a meeting or for a blog post or whatever it might be. And there were two different approaches for doing this. It's a very long debate. There's one approach, which is we take pages and treat them like an attachment to every row. And then you're probably familiar with some other products that have done that, where basically every row comes with a page. And we opted for a slightly different model. So instead of thinking of pages as rows, we thought of pages as columns. And so, the way it surfaces to people is as a new column type. And so you can take any column in Coda and you can now use select type canvas. And that is a full page inside your row. And so you can open this up and you can, take notes in it, or add a dory, or you can hit equals and get a formula builder. Everything you're used to from pages, you can now do here. You can make this full screen so it really feels like a page. And now you are looking at a row, but it happens to have all the features of our new editor, including the things I just showed you, like side by side. So I can go take this and push it side by side. Oops, I'm not finding my drag handle right. But the interesting thing about making it a column is that it allowed us to really make the formula model work with it. And I know it's the thing that many people expect out of Coda, is that all of these things just work seamlessly together. So, one of my favorite demos of that is this one, which is I can take here, I can take my notes field, I can go find every line in it that starts with AI : and make it a bulleted list. And now I can come in here, and you'll notice that column is right here. It's action items column. And so I can say AI show 3.0 webinar, how to work with canvas columns.
I love seeing it just populate as you type too. That's so cool.
And it just turns out to be amazingly useful. It's not pulling out of here. I mean, I can do the same thing down here and go and drag this action item around and have it do exactly the same thing. And there's another one for summary as a column here. So I can just add here and you'll see it pop into the summary. So this was really complicated. And again, another feature that probably people are going to take for granted, that it just works the way you would expect. But first level challenge was, how do we make them columns or do we make them rows? Next level challenge was, how do they surface in the formula language, and what should it feel like? We also spent a lot of time on, what about going the other way? What about while I'm in here, can I access these set of things? And you actually can. And this took a whole bunch of work to get right. If you just type this row here, which is a thing a lot of advanced Coda makers understand, so that is actually a reference to the outside row. And so I can even do things like do a little bit of inception and get, here's a bulleted list of all the action items from up there.
Wow.
I guess I don't need the bulleted list because it was already a bulleted list, so I can just say like that, which is kind of fun that now I can have my action items table directly in there. I think that's perhaps too much inception, but it gives a sense of the flexibility of what can be done. So the new editor was really challenging. Lots of hard choices, lots of detail, lots of kind of rethinking the core building blocks of Coda as well.
I love that. And also just thinking about how the new editor literally touches every aspect of the product. Like there's not one point where like, oh, we don't need to think about it here, but there's all sorts of those downstream effects. We have some really good questions coming through that I'd love to hear some responses to. It's from Connor, who's been around with us for a long time as one of our super makers, which is, I've been building and publishing things that I want to be around forever. Can you help me feel safe knowing that my docs will be available long into the future? So can we give Connor some hot cocoa, a little blanket, be like, I'm okay.
I mean, I think it's a great question, and I think not only docs, but people on this call, many of you are investing your skill sets or your teams or so on in Coda, and it's important to know that it's a platform that is going to be around for the long term. Obviously, hard to promise anything for very, very long terms, but a few different ways I can answer this. I think that the company is sort of past that early viability point in almost every way you can think of. I mean, we now have over 50,000 teams using Coda, over 1 million users. I don't think this is, you don't have to think about a risk of betting on sort of flash in the pan, not sure if it's going to work kind of product. As a company, we've raised almost $250 million from investors, and I think we'll be plenty well funded to be able to keep this moving for a very long time. And you should know that concern is held very deeply by some of our largest customers, and so we spend a lot of time with them and making sure that they feel safe about it. And that's everyone from Nike to Pinterest to to the New York Times. And so we spend a lot of time on that as well, and including in the absolute worst case, making sure there's great backups of everything and anybody can export whatever they like. But that's not really what I want you to rest on. I want you to rest on the fact that we're here to stay.
Yeah, totally. We have a really good question from Steve, which Eric, I'd actually love your perspectives on this, which is, it's important for me to be able to send emails from Coda. I need to select people with external email addresses and send them information of all kinds, some of which is in Coda and some of which would be free form when the email is created. Can I do this using an existing pack? Like, how might we think about that here for Steve? I love this question.
Yeah, I mean, part of, I think, thinking about packs, which is a little different than thinking about other extensions or add-ons you may use in other products, is that they are building blocks. They are meant to be plugged together with your doc and with other packs. So you don't have to find the one pack that happens to exactly bring all the data from all the places you need, and then you just hit that one button, because there are so many different needs people have. To find that exact extension pre-built is going to be so hard. But with packs, on the other hand, you're actually the one taking the Lego pieces, putting them together, and building the flow you need. And so, for instance, a Gmail pack just knows how to send email, look at email. It's just, I'm focused on email. But what goes into that email can come from anywhere in your doc or any other pack. So you could use the Zoom pack to pull in your latest Zoom meetings and then put that into a table, combine that with some data in your doc, and then take all of that and send it to the Gmail pack to be sent out in an email. So it requires some customization. You have to be a little bit of a Lego builder, right? A little bit of imagination, a little trial and error, but it's all just connecting pieces in a Coda doc, buttons to tables, to rows, to sync tables, to packs. And once you get a hold of it, I think the flexibility that brings is really powerful.
Yeah. Folks who, I know we have some of my doctorate candidates here in the audience today, and folks who've ever attended a webinar or a session that I've led know that I'm always going to drop a metaphor. So Steve, the metaphor that I would give you here is, you could be like, okay, does Coda allow me to make lasagna? And like, where's the lasagna, right? I need it. And what we can think about is when we're cooking something, we have the end in mind. But in order to get from where we are now to the end, we have to figure out, like, okay, well, is my vegan friend coming to this? Okay, I need to use non-vegan cheese. I need to use vegan cheese. Okay, and I really want to have like a really good vegetable sauce. I've got some zucchinis here that I need to include, so we're going to add it in. So it's all about really figuring out, where do I want to go? What is my purpose? What is the problem I'm solving here? And then thinking about, what are the ingredients, the Legos or the food, whatever metaphor works better for you, that are going to put me together. So if you know the end email I need to send is going to have this, 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 and this, now you can go, great, the Gmail pack is going to be the engine that sends it. Here's the information from the Coda doc that I can put in formulaically, and then it'll let you know what other packs you might need to leverage to fill in the rest of the gaps of your lasagna. So that's kind of how I would think about it. Yeah. Hey,
very common Coda use case. I would definitely look at the Gmail pack. I was going to suggest one that I thought was a particularly fun example of this. Is a doc from Nick Mehta that I thought was really insightful. People that don't know Nick, he's the CEO and founder of Gainsight. And he wrote this really nice piece, how I meet 500 plus customers a year as a CEO. And the piece itself is really interesting, but his trick is this thing he does called ghost notes. And the basic idea is that he sets up his team to be able to send emails like this to clients. And they kind of prep it for him. And they used to send it to his admin, and then his admin would recraft it a bit, put it in his drafts, and then he would hit send. And so it's probably worth looking at how he did it in Coda, but he basically created a series of templates, which you can see here. And each of these things looks like this. It says, hi recipient, I'm the CEO of Gainsight. I see you've been working closely with so-and-so, and sort of pulling information from different parts of Coda into one spot. And then, and actually he did this other neat trick here where when when the salesperson or so on clicks this button, it actually puts it in his drafts. And so it kind of cuts out that middle step. But yeah, all of that, like Maria said, is totally possible in Coda. Lots of people on this call that can probably help with that too. But I thought that was a fun example of putting it to use.
Shishir, could you pop the link to that doc in chat for folks if they want to go ahead and snag a copy? Ooh, we have another really good question here from Courtney. Hey, Courtney, it's so good to see you or see your name in chat, which is, I want consistent design and branding. So I'm wondering about CSS customization. So this makes me think of the pack that Ben Lee built. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about this pack?
Yeah, so we have a code-in who was sending, I think, weekly emails with some information in it. And, with the Gmail pack, it says, give me your HTML and I'll send it. But then you have to know how to get that HTML. And building that can be a little challenging. It requires some knowledge. And so he spent some time kind of taking a template of email that kind of had nice columns and colors and fonts and styles, and building a pack out of that said, okay, just give me like the title and the text you want to show in the middle and a list of stuff. And the pack figures out how to take that and render it as a pretty email template, which then feeds into the Gmail pack. It's not actually sending the email. It's just the step in the baking process of your lasagna that actually creates the text, the HTML content, which then you hand off to the Gmail pack to actually send it off into the world. And so that was a really nice kind of combination, exactly what you're talking about. Now, this one pack builds HTML in one way. That you could build your own pack to build it HTML another way. A partner could build another pack that lets you do even more customization. The options there are still pretty open, but this one kind of shows where packs can go to solving a problem like that.
Yeah, and it looks like Courtney's saying, I want to do this with Coda itself. So all of the content is in Coda, right? So if we think about it, I am going back to the Dr. Seuss of the Sneetches, where the Sneetches go into the machine and then they come out with like a star on their belly, or they come out with no star on their belly. That's what I think about here, is that you've got Coda, which can be the place where I'm pulling, maybe to Shishir's earlier point, I could do the, I want to pull in the action items using the current value and like put that here. And then, I want to pull in the summary with a formula. And I'm just putting it inside of a little table inside of my Coda doc that can then render it, Sneetchify it, to have it be an HTML that then the Gmail pack can send out. Now, you could also just send the values of a page, but you're going to get less of that kind of branding as you would in that situation.
It's probably worth mentioning, I know your question wasn't exactly this, because we were talking about how to send emails. I think the topic of allowing people to customize design, branding, so on, there's a lot of that. When you see what we're doing with packs, a big piece of what we're doing is sort of opening up the platform so people can customize it in their own ways. We started with a simple goal of take the things that our developers could do to create packs and just make that available to everybody. So the core of what you can do with packs is an enormous amount of work that went into that. You can use different authentication modes, you can connect to different endpoints, you can do all these different things. But the core of what we did is you can create sync tables, you can create new formulas, you can create new column formats and so on. But what you should expect over time is that we're going to packs is going to be our way of opening up the platform more generally. And high on that team's list is things like supporting different types of design and branding. That's a very common request. Custom icons comes up a lot. So all those things are on our list of how we're thinking about it. And the pack platform has been designed to start making those things extensible within Coda itself. I know a slightly different question than customizing your emails, but I also think customizing the core product is high on people's lists that way.
Yeah. And honestly, that once that problem set is cracked, right, then it's the way that we think about solving problems is not just let's solve this one sliver of a problem, but let's go and think about that macro, right? And speaking of macro, one thing I've noticed with the 3.0 launches is that I'm now rethinking, like reconceptualizing my Coda docs now that this new paradigm has been created. And this actually goes to one of Connor's questions, which is, great, we have these Canvas columns now. Shishir, have you been revisiting any docs that you have now that this new ingredient is in our pantry? Like, have you been reimagining some of your core templates?
What you want pre-releases of my templates? I have. And actually, it was pretty dramatic shift for me. Canvas columns, I mean, both the features of the new editor are pretty dramatic shifts, but Canvas columns probably was a bigger change for my day-to-day work than the side-by-side work was. I think the one that is probably the most obvious, it actually isn't a personal template. We changed how we do Dory and Pulse throughout the whole company. And actually, it turns out to be a very simple thing. Is Dory, as I assume most people know, is our topic voting system. That's how we think about asking questions in meetings, setting up agendas, and so on. And generally, it's pretty simple. There's a list of topics, and there's a button or a reaction for upvoting which ones people want to talk about. And then we would have this awkward decision on where do the notes go. And oftentimes we put the notes. There's basically two options. You write them underneath the table and it sort of feels disassociated from the topic, or you put it in a cell, in a column. But now that column, as many of you know, is an old school Coda was just a normal text column and didn't support all the richness of our column types and most importantly, collaboration. So two of us couldn't take notes at the same time. So I think that's actually the use case that happened near immediately. Almost every single Dory got added. The notes column turned into a Canvas column. On my own personal side, yeah, I mean, I will be publishing more. I think I'm in the middle of updating the sort of three templates together. One is the calendar coloring one that you mentioned. There's another one I call the zero inbox template. And then there's what I'm working on, a thing called To-Do List 2.0, which is sort of smushing them all together into one spot. And I think from that perspective, the big win for me is I move my notes into the same place as my meeting manager and my to-do list. And I think I used to keep these in separate spaces because I wanted the full Coda editor to be able to keep those notes. But now it's a pretty simple idea. My calendar syncs into a document. For any of those items where I want to take notes, I hit a button, it creates a note, and I can go and fill that in. And it has all the information about that meeting and so on. I also think of it a little bit like an inbox. I end each day by looking through what are all the meetings I did today. As you might imagine, my calendar tends to be pretty dense. And then for each one, what are the notes and what are the potential follow-ups? I make sure I'm getting back to people in a timely way. I also built another fun trick in there, which is it auto guesses for me if those notes need to go to anybody else. So for example, if I met a customer, it will it has a list of who should get those notes, and it'll auto fill in. Here's the customer success manager for this customer, and I'll press a button, and the notes will not only sit in my repository, but will get automatically sent to them. Or if I meet an employee in the team, I make sure that a summary gets to their manager, or so on. So, or a candidate, I'll make sure that the summary gets to the recruiter. And that's been pretty interesting, of not just capturing everything in one place, but making it actionable and making sure the right people get to see it. But that's a little preview of what's coming soon. And I'm working on it.
I also find that when all of a sudden now I just don't use as many pages as I used to. It's like, oh, actually, instead of having like a page and then subpage for every project that I'm working on, like, oh, I just have my projects table, and then I now have a Canvas column for everything. And I find that my Coda docs are now going from being like many pages, because I follow the rule of one purpose per page. And now I'm like, oh, I just now kind of have a table in like maybe 4 pages. That's been a big thing I've been seeing differently. We have a really good question around, I love, Christian, that you're using this idea about the low floor, high ceiling. So Shishir, first of all, could you describe what we mean by low floor, high ceiling? And then can you elaborate on how low the floor is or is perceived by our largest user group, AKA non-tech people like me, Maria Marquis?
Yeah, so let me give the analogy, and Christian, thanks for bringing this up. This analogy I use a lot for not just for Coda, but for this whole category. I think we're going through this really interesting renaissance in documents, and we like to call it the all-in-one doc movement. That for 50 years we've all been sort of using roughly the same things that WordStar, Harvard Graphics, and VisiCalc, three great products formed in the 70s and early 80s. We've basically been using new versions of those for 50 years. And so the idea that we should create a new type of document, usually the first promise people look for is blend those all together. But in that process, you can create all sorts of new things. And I think that's what the all-in-one doc movement is about. And I think we're a really strong player in this, but we're not the only ones with that insight. And there's others coming after it. I think most products in this space will get judged on this thing Christian brings up about how what I call low floor, high ceiling. So low floor means an all-in-one doc needs to have an incredibly low floor to get started. Documents have one of the lowest floors of almost any products in the business. You can ask, billions of people around the world, what do you know how to do on a computer? And the vast majority of them know how to open up a blinking cursor that they love and start typing. And that's got to be the bar for the lowest floor. And on the other end, the promise of an all-in-one doc is not only can I get everything in one place, but I can start using all those building blocks to accomplish more than I ever thought possible of my productivity tools. We call that the high ceiling, the ability to do more than you might think. And I think people's aspirations of high ceilings for products like Coda are incredibly high. I mean, we now have many companies that run entirely on Coda. We've seen people replace very large package SaaS applications or big custom installations with things built out of some of the things we just described, and using all the richness of Coda to build those applications. So we spend a lot of time on both sides. And you might look at Coda 3.0, if you use that lens, as being a little bit balanced between the two of them. A lot of what we did with the new editor was really about the low floor. A lot of what we did with new packs was about extending the ceiling, making it possible to connect to even more things. Now, of course, both of them kind of overlap. I mean, I think what we showed with canvas columns, in some of those advanced cases are also increasing the ceiling, and some of the packs use cases really reduce the floor because it prevents a step of pulling information from somewhere else or something that you might have had to do in another tool. So that's how we think about low floor, high ceiling. What do I think we are on this journey? I never think we're far enough on either side. I mean, I think on low floor and a high ceiling, I think we have room to go. On the low floor side, it's not. I get asked a lot about what is the learning curve for Coda, and there's this really tricky answer to that question, because the simplest answer to that question is there's no learning curve. It's a blinking cursor on a blank screen. If you know how to use Word or Google Docs or your Notepad or so on, you can use Coda just fine. And interestingly, the majority, I know this is probably not true of many of you on this call, but the vast majority of users who use Coda, that's how they use Coda. For them, the magic of Coda has nothing to do with buttons and formulas and packs and so on. It has to do with, it's just a better editor that I'm used to from other places. And usually we'll see documents that just use pages and icons and get really excited about it. And I think that is really important to recognize. So on one side, the floor is incredibly low. It's a blinking cursor on a blank screen. Of course, it's, there's a potential to do more with it, and we're constantly wrestling with how much of that to introduce to users right at the beginning. But a lot of what we wanted to do with the new editor is move the moment of magic up. So I wanted to make it such that your first moment of feeling that this is the cursor for me comes further up the journey. And I think we've definitely accomplished that with the new editor and things like side by side. All of a sudden, before you get to things that feel more advanced, formulas, buttons, or so on, you say, hey, I can build something that really looks the way I want it to look. We use as a line for understanding our goal for this, we often say, our goal is in the low floor is that we want to be the blinking cursor of choice for 2 billion people. And I think that's really high bar. I mean, I'm sure everyone here has a, when you have an idea or a thought, where do you go first? Some of you reach for paper and pencil. Some of you pick up a Post-it note. Some of you pick up, Word or Google Docs. And we want that to be Coda, because my belief is that when you achieve that bar, then people gradually extend their use cases. Things grow in ways that you might not expect. And that's, I think, our moment to get there. So, I think there's always more we can do there. I'm really excited about the steps we did here and moving that moment of magic up, making Coda an even more obvious choice of blinking cursor, but there's much more we can do there.
Yeah. I love this. So we just had some detail from Shishir on what's happening on the floor, but now we have a question about what's happening up there on the ceiling, Eric. Connor is talking about, I build a lot of complex docs for my profession. And spending time testing to make sure things are correct or working as expected. Could a testing framework ever come to Coda? And how might that express itself in packs? What are your thoughts on this really interesting question? And Steve will take yours next.
That is really interesting. I mean, bravo to people who want to do testing. I gotta say, even among engineers, testing is sometimes some of the most grueling work, although some of the most important work. And so, yeah, PAX is a bit of an open platform, right? Like we give you these spots, these empty dotted line areas, insert your stuff here. And in a pack, you can insert a whole bunch of stuff. I built a pack that does emojis, just cause there's not really a lot of boundaries on what you can put in a pack. Now, packs today, as Shishir mentioned, we had to make sure they could fit into Coda. And for me, the most exciting part about packs compared to other extension platforms is it's not you add some things off to the side in a sidebar. It happens to be on the same screen as your Coda doc, but that's about it. You are really adding functionality directly into Coda right there alongside everything our engineers have built. Your stuff lives with the exact same capabilities and behaviors and rules and limitations and integration to the formula editor and everything else. And so for me, I think that what that means today is that packs are kind of opinionated. There are certain things you can build, and there are certain things that maybe we need to further increase our scope, as Shishir was talking about. We want to add in the ability to customize branding and other elements. And so we plan to grow packs to include more and more areas. So I think looking at the testing you want to do, we probably have to get down to specifics. Can a pack access a piece of data that you're trying to verify? But in general, the framework is there, and our ambition is to make it something that a pack can include, a range of different functionality. And I think probably testing a complex doc is something definitely high up there in the ceiling area, where most people aren't even building those docs, not to mention trying to test them. But I think that's something that, especially combined with our Coda API, a separate offering we've had for a while, putting those two things together, I think there are some options.
Yeah, and it almost seems like maybe, Connor, and I'd be interested to hear what you think, Eric, the more challenging part of this problem is really figuring out what are the things I need to test.
Yes.
Actually mapping out the testing that's required, and then building the thing to support it will be, of course, its own little challenge, but it seems like really figuring out the ingredients is the more hard part. I don't know, Eric, if that feels right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people who write tests in code know that it's, the framework you use, you download it and install it. Then you have to do the hard part of figuring out what is the correct answer for 100 different combinations of inputs.
Yes.
And that's definitely where the work is.
So we have the floor, we have the ceiling. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Shishir. I'd love to hear from you.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I think testing packs was actually, Eric mentioned one of the decisions we made is to support a web-based editor for it, and that allows us to have a fast debug loop on packs. And I think that the decisions were sort of tied together. I think the more broad question on can I test docs and what does that feel like? That's actually been a thing we've thought a lot about as well. Is I've got a big doc. It's launched to my team. Thousands of people are using it. How do I go and make updates to it without necessarily breaking anybody? And I'd love thoughts on people's patterns for doing it. We've thought about a few different ways. We thought about, for example, adding a disconnected mode or something close to what we do with play mode in the published doc case, where you could take it and say, I want to make a bunch of edits. Please don't sync them back in. And then when I'm done, I can throw them away or choose to commit them. That's one pattern we thought about, but I'd love ideas on other ways people would think about that.
That's super cool. Excellent. So we had floor, we had ceiling. We went back to the floor and ceiling a little bit. Now we have an off the wall question from Steve. Sorry, I couldn't not do the pun, Steve. I had to do it, which is Steve's a longtime Evernote user and mainly using it as a document repository, loves Coda and what can be done with all the formulas, and wondering about your thoughts on, number one, a way to import selective Evernote notes, and then using Coda as an Evernote replacement, because Steve would love that single source of truth that we're all looking for in our lives. So Shishir, what are your thoughts here on this process?
On the maybe I feel strongly about this one because I was a diehard Evernote user for years, and so I've been very familiar with the platform. Before that, a diehard OneNote user back when Microsoft came out with it. And so I think, and I'm an incessant note taker. I think of it as my way to actually stay engaged, is to make sure I'm writing and thinking about what people are saying. So it's a question very close to how I think about it. To answer the second one first, I think, can Coda be an Evernote replacement? I would have said before Canvas columns, you would feel some stretch in our ability to do that. Many of us use Coda that way, but I think Canvas columns really changed how to think about it. And honestly, you can set up your equivalent of Evernote in Coda now almost exactly. Build a table of notes, have a column for your notes, for the actual body of the notes, and still keep columns for other things. And some of the benefits I mentioned earlier become really simple. Like I want to auto create a note for every meeting on my calendar, becomes a really easy thing to do. Or I want to set up workflow that sends out summaries to the right people, or reminds me if I haven't finished out the action items or whatever there might be. And you can kind of, if Evernote felt a little bit like a craftable set of building blocks, I think the equivalent in Coda will feel next level from that perspective. In terms of import, I don't think someone's built an Evernote importer yet, although I know it's on people's minds. I know they have an export format that can be massaged a bit, or you can import it into another tool that we do import from. For example, you can import Evernote into Notion and Notion into Coda. That will probably work okay. But yeah, I think there's a few different ways to do that. And if somebody wants to build that, I think that would be wonderful. I think the Evernote API isn't perfect for a pack, but I think it probably could be done. But I definitely high advocacy for Coda as a better notebook than Evernote.
Yeah, and also when in doubt, copy paste. Always something that can happen, and maybe a good way to start testing out. But I love this idea of an Evernote pack. Let's do it, community. Let's do it. We have a really good question from Jarrett, which is, you mentioned that there are other products in this all-in-one doc space. What's one feature from those other products that you find interesting and maybe think might have a future in Coda? Or maybe kind of, we already talked about the primary difference of Canvas as column or Canvas as row sort of changes how we think about what's possible. But Shishir, I'd love to hear from you on a reflection here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different approaches people are taking to the all-in-one doc space. And, some of the early ones, I think, really stayed very close to the core definition of a document, whether that was Quip or Dropbox Paper or some of those types of tools. I think there's a whole other class of all-in-one docs that have focused on a wiki or website metaphor first. Confluence, Notion, so on have all come from that direction. And a lot of what we did with the new editor was trying to smush those two worlds together. And so certainly what we try to do with page layouts and the new editor was pulling together some of the most obvious trade-offs that people make that we didn't think they should have to make. You should be able to pick the best of both. I think there's obviously always a long list of things we want to do next. Some of the ones we hear most frequently, and you guys should feel free to give feedback if you have other thoughts on this. From the classic documents, I think at this point, most of what you can do, certainly in Google Docs, not in Word. Word does a million things that I'm not sure anybody uses, but certainly in Google Docs, probably the thing we hear most is improvements to comments and improvements to the suggestion mode. Is one of the things that I watch a lot of people ask about, and so that's I think become important in a collaborative environment. Is how can you work together on a document? Another one that we see from the wiki space that's high on our list is sometimes it gets referred to as sharing subpages, so the ability to take parts of a document and share it with others. To be honest, that one's a lot trickier. I think many of those products have much simpler data models, and so for them, sharing a subset of a document or a space is a little bit easier to do because the expectations on data or editability and so on are much lower. Whereas in Coda, when I share a sub part of a document, it's not always clear. Do I intend to share all the data that leads to it? Do I intend to be able to access the rest of that document? And so we're working through a lot of those tricky issues. But I think those two things are probably the most common ones we hear about: comments and suggesting and subdoc sharing.
Very cool. Excellent. We have a question here for Eric, and it's from Alyssa. Hello, Alyssa. So good to have you here. Which is, are we able to comment out code yet? Because that's something that's kind of basic for folks who are, have that developer experience. So how are we thinking about that, Eric? I'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, there are two areas where I think this could apply: building a pack and writing a formula. So for building a pack, you are writing JavaScript. That's the kind of the language we use to power packs, and even TypeScript, which is an advanced form of JavaScript. So you can use comments and a whole bunch of other crazier things than that. So comments are fully available there. I think this question may have been targeted to the Coda formula editor, where I think last I checked, comments are still not a thing. That said, as someone who likes comments, I would love that.
Very common ask. It's coming. It's on a just to give a little insight into our development process, we sometimes do most of what we do with Coda is larger, what we call stories, where we take big efforts and work on them sometimes for a few months, sometimes for, like the editor, almost 2 years. And then occasionally what we do is we take a little break, we call it a shipathon, and people spend a week working on smaller ideas that can move things forward. The commenting one has been on that list for a while. Actually, the precursor to that was making it possible to do carriage returns in the formula builder and having the large formula builder. Both of those things came out of shipathons, and that team I know has a roadmap of here's what they want to pull in there. Comments are a very common one, so it'll come.
Cool. And speaking of roadmaps, we have a private chatter question saying, what are some of the milestones that we're thinking about for Coda in 2022, 2023? Sort of what are some of the themes that we're thinking through? Maybe let's start, Eric, on the PAC side, and then we'll go to Shishir on sort of the general product side. So Eric, kind of what are we thinking about, as far as general waypoints that we want to hit on our PAC life?
Yeah, I mean, the big one right now for 2022 is what you see in my lower third here, which is that we really want people to be able to build a whole business on top of Coda, to build, the companies, the docs that run their company, things that they can sell to other people, an external presence. We really want Coda to be not something that just is where you write your notes, although that's a great use case for it, but to go way beyond that, to be a place where people can build a livelihood, can build a business. And so that kind of thesis and that kind of goal kind of spreads into a lot of different areas, both technical, financial, like can you sell a pack? Can you make money doing this kind of work? How do you then support users? How do you do the testing that we talked about on docs? All of those kind of tie together. How do you create a kind of a long-lived, successful experience and business built on Coda? So that's kind of like, at least knowledge-wise or theme-wise, where we're headed. I think obviously in the short term right now, PAX is still in a beta and anyone can apply, coda.io/PAX beta. But we want to get it really in the hands of everyone. So it's sitting right there in your Coda editor. You can click build a new pack. So right now we're laser like focused on getting that out to everybody. And that's where we figure before you can build a business, you need to build a pack. But we do think that that's kind of some of the next areas we want to go towards, is how do we not just make it so that a pack is in the gallery, but that kind of becomes just the starting point of building a much larger business or experience on Coda.
It's probably worth re-upping that. We talked a lot about sort of the first two big buckets of changes with Coda 3.0, but this third one, I think what Eric is talking about here, I actually think is one of the more fundamental things, is changing the business model for the community. And I think we rolled out 3 different ways to do it. So we're gradually allowing people to start selling things in the gallery as you might think of you would do in one of the app stores. Put a price on it, sell it to Coda customers. We're starting with packs. The expectation is that we'll start extending that with docs as well. The two of them often go closely together. And I think that's a sort of traditional marketplace model. The second model is the affiliate model, where you can sign up, and any customer you bring into Coda, you'll get 20% of their first year revenue, and whatever they spend on Coda, not just on that use case, but on all use cases. And the third is a maker fund, where we're accepting applications, and we've gotten some really amazing ones and funded a lot of amazing ones from people who just need a kickstart to get off the ground as they form it into a broader business model for themselves. I think that's actually really interesting, and we're trying really hard on the product side to make it possible to extend Coda, but on the business side, I think it's important that the community find not just be able to scratch their own itches for themselves and their teams, but actually to be able to build a business on Coda. So I think we're putting a lot of our work into making sure that whole experience is pretty good. In terms of some of the other questions on what you should expect this year, I'd say lots more to come. And I think thematically, one of our designers used this analogy that for the last couple of years, it felt like we had all the heavy equipment out. We had all the table saws out and all the, and really rebuilding core parts of Coda. I think you're going to see a lot of things that feel a lot more like having sandpaper out, and really finishing the edges of things that we've done, and completing some of the scenarios that we've been working on. There's still room for a few fairly large things coming that I know we're working on, but I'm really excited about taking your feedback and really rounding out the edges of the things that are already there, making sure they all work as well as you'd like.
Yeah, I love this. We have a question that is kind of in your world, Eric. This is from KT. Hey, KT. I love seeing all my alumni here, which is around PAX. Is there a type of office hours or user support place where, sort of non-technical folks can start to maybe flex their PAX skills and grow, sort of just giving people a framework to think about it and how to get that support. So Eric, I'd love to hear from you.
Yes, it's definitely something where is on my mind a lot, is that I think I don't just want to preach to people about PAX who already know how to build software. I would like to bring more people into the fold. I think having a goal-oriented reason to start programming is the most powerful way to get into that if you want to expand your skill set to kind of writing some code. Kind of for me, just starting at like picking up a book or a course just feels abstract, but versus like I need to have my doc do a thing is very much like there's a big piece of cheese at the end of that maze. And I want people to be able to start to engage who maybe feel a little out of their depth. And so, yeah, I'm thinking about the best forums for that. If you have suggestions, I'm definitely all ears. I do think some amount of in-person discussion oriented is really important, especially when these concepts can be new and the technical documentation can be dense. One of the things we made a decision on is to have the PAX community be inside the larger Coda community. It's not going to be a separate place just for developers with a passcode, right? It's right there in the open. Wander in, see what people are talking about. It's the same login, and it's the same community of folks. There are a lot of people who already have Scott, who was in the chat before. Someone kind of crossed over saying, "Never read a line of code." Now has 2 packs published in the gallery and more to come. And I think I hope to see a lot more of that. And any way I can be a way to kind of help people get over that line, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah. And
make a little plug for.
Oh yeah, plug away.
I was going to make a little plug for Maria Marquis and her amazing programs. So if you haven't attended, obviously you're here, so you know how to get to our webinars, although this one's not in this normal location. But I think Maria's webinars, I always get such positive feedback on those. And also Maria runs a doctorate program, which I'm sure Maria can tell more about for people that are ready for that next step as well.
I just had to grab the link to the doctorate program. So the doctorate program is a free program that I provide. It's a 6-week deep dive into doc building. We don't get into pack building in the program yet, but that is something that's really on my mind. So starting off with making sure that folks feel super confident in Coda from a design perspective. So this isn't about like, what do these little features do? But okay, now I have that problem I want to solve. How do I go through this process? How do I start off from scratch and build something that's going to be a true solution to my problem? But one thing that I've been thinking about is creating a baccalaureate working title program because I love a pun, and inspired by something that Eric actually did for us internally when we were first dealing with the PAX Studio very early. This idea of what can we do to break down, not like, let me pick up the manual and know what all these things do, but how do we break down that problem solving process? And what are the different components and how do they work at a macro level? So instead of me teaching you how to bake just this one, German chocolate cake, I'm going to actually teach you how baking works in general so that you can start to make up your own, because maybe you just don't like coconut in your chocolate cake, which I fully respect. So that's something that I'm thinking through, what that a partnership between Eric and myself, what we might be able to do there. But in the short term, head to the community, let us know what kind of support you need, because now that PAX Studio exists, like we're ready to start digging in with all of you. And some of my favorite features and favorite programs that we've launched have been directly because of feedback from the folks who use and love Coda who want to go a little deeper. So we have 2 more minutes, and I would just love in the final moments here for each of you to share your favorite thing about 3.0. So Shishir, let's start with you. What is your favorite thing about 3.0, or the thing you're most proud of, excited about?
Favorite thing. This is like picking favorite kids. It's not. Yeah. That's not fair.
I know I'm your favorite kid. Duh.
I think I do think the product changes are really meaningful, but it's probably not obvious how much work went into the business program changes. And actually the work the team did on the affiliate program, I think is really cool. And I don't think it's, I think that idea we just seen a lot of people where they'll introduce Coda to a new customer, and then we'll watch, as you might expect, Coda sort of spread throughout that company. And you can only capture so much of that value as a Coda advocate in that first interaction. And we just wanted a way to be able to do that in a seamless way. And so it actually works just fine whether you just publish docs or packs to the gallery. Everybody that signs up through it, you get this credit back. And I know the product stuff is, as you can all tell, near and dear to my heart. But I actually think innovating on the business model has a broader ecosystem impact as well.
Cool. And I just put a link there, folks. If anyone wants to join that affiliate program, go ahead, please do. Eric, what is the thing that you're most excited about, proud of with 3.0?
Yeah, this might be a little bit meta, but for me, I was just really proud and excited to see how our company came together on this moment, which is to say, like, this was really an entire company effort for 3.0, and having so many people across the company involved and excited and cheering and happy and working and pushing to get it out there and to get what we're really proud of into the hands of so many people. It was just a very rewarding experience, and I hope that shows in the actual output and the quality of the product, and I think it does.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, for, again, coming to a new place, a new secret location inside of this process.
On the hideout.
I know, right? It's the speakeasy. We're really good. It's been a pleasure spending some time with all of you. Thank you, Eric and Shishir, for taking time out of your day to share your brilliance, answer questions. It's always a pleasure sitting down with the two of you. Folks who are here, please feel free to get in touch with us on the community. And that is a great place to stay apprised of updates, things that are happening, and be part of the conversation. And more than anything, thank you all for being the best part of Coda, which is the brains that are using it. That is where I get my daily inspiration. So thank you all. And I hope you had a great time today, and stay tuned and stay in touch. It's been great spending time with you all. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.